Hi, in this video we will continue building a decentralized peer-to-peer network. And in the previous video we made our messaging system two-way, meaning both sides can send and receive messages. In this video we will add some file transfer to our code. So program one was the final code that we made. I'm copying it, pasting it into another file, Python file named program 2. So this is the second version. And then yeah, let's add the file transfer now. First, I'm gonna import OS to read the file name, read the size of the file, and I'm also gonna add a header equals to separator, sorry, equals to sep. So you'll understand in a minute why I wrote this line. Now, in order to receive and send files, we are gonna still use receive messages and send messages functions, which we called before. For send messages, we are just gonna add, we will also allow file transfer through the terminal, and we are gonna do that by if message dot starts with /file, then run send file function. Yep. But before running the send file function, we also need to say message equals to. We also need to split the file path using message.split, and we are gonna make it like this. And one, actually, this is gonna be a file path. Then we are gonna say connection and file path. Now, when we are sending a file to the other device, what we are going to do is we will first send a header. This header will contain the file path and the file size. So the receiver knows which file that we are receiving and what is the size of the file that we are receiving. So in this code, what we do is while we are sending the file, the way we will type the file sending is we are going to say /file and the file path. So this is the way we are going to send the file. So when we write this code, this line, we are just taking the file path here, just cropping the file path out and sending into the send file function, which we are now gonna code. So let's go to define send file connection and file path. Cool. So this will be responsible for sending the file. Then what we are going to do is we are going to check whether that file actually exists in our system. If not, os dot path dot exists, and we're going to put file path. If it doesn't exist, just return, because we are trying to send an invalid file. But what if it exists? If it exists, then we're going to take file name. Just do like this: file name equals to os dot path dot base name file path. This will return us the file name, and then file size equals to os dot file path dot get size, and again file path is an argument. So this basically OS handles some system level work. In this case, we are using it to read the file name and file size. I'm using Windows, that's why I'm using OS here. If you are using Mac, there might be an alternative for this. I mean, I don't think Mac supports OS, so yeah. Cool, so we read the file name and the file size. And we are also gonna have a header, right? So what is this header? when we are sending a file, we will first send the header to the other side. We are not going to send the file directly. We are going to send a header that indicates that we are going to send the file. And this header will contain the file name and the file size, so the receiver knows which file to receive and what is the size of the file that it needs to receive. So we are going to call the receiver part accordingly. Now the header is going to be containing some different components: file, separator, file name, and then again separator, and file size. What is this? Now when we initiate a connection, we will send the header first, right? Actually we can send the header now. Connection.send fernet.encrypt. Yep, let's encrypt the header.decode. Cool. I explained all of these in my previous videos, what encrypt means, what decode means, so you can check my previous videos out if you don't know. And so when we send the header first, the receiver will have a code like this: if what you receive starts with file, right, that means we are sending a file, so it will act accordingly. Then if it starts with file, we are going to break up the file name and the file size into different variables so that we know what is the file name and the file size. After sending the header, we are going to start sending the file now with open file path read binary as file. This is where we are gonna read send our file while true. Oops. We are gonna send our file in chunks because our file might be like a gigabyte long, a gigabyte in size. So we are not gonna send a gigabyte once. We are gonna break it into chunks, and the chunk will be the buffer which we defined before. Is 4096 bytes. This can change based on the system actually, so we are just using a fixed buffer for now. And then if not chunk, if chunk doesn't exist, if we read all the bytes that we need to read, we return because we don't have anything, or break because we don't have anything to send. If it isn't the case, then we say connection dot send for not dot encrypt chunk. We are sending the chunk to the other file, which now our code is done. So the send file function is done actually. You also need define receive file because we cannot capture this file using the method we use for receiving messages. We need to receive the file in chunks, and we need to be able to make it a single file, construct it into a single file. Or so this receive file will have a couple of arguments: connection, file name, and the file size. Remember, we sent those in our header. Okay, cool. We then have a received equals to 0, and we are going to increase this received as we receive the file. And when the received matches the file size, we know we received the complete file, so we will break out of this function. So we say with open file name and write binary as file. So while received is less than file size, meaning what we didn't receive the whole file. If we didn't receive the whole file, then the data equals to connection dot receive buffer. So we receive the buffer, and then decrypt equals to fernet dot decrypt data. And now we decrypt what we received. Then we write it into our file. And we also need to update the received accordingly. Length of decrypted. We are increasing the receipt as we receive files. So I think this should work, right? We receive it, we decrypt it, we write it into our file, and we also increase the receipt by the length by the amount of bytes that we receive. When we receive the whole file, receipt will be equal to the file size, so we will break out of this while loop, and the function ends. Now you might ask, what if there is a momentary connection error? Like, what if my connection just goes out for a second? Then this code will probably not work. I haven't tested it, but I will test it, and if it doesn't work, I'll make another video where we will improve the code. For now, as far as I tested it, it works. So yeah, let's keep moving. Start server, start client, they are gonna be the same. Now we need to update the receive messages. Now, what we can do is we can say decrypted equals to fernet decrypt data. So we decrypt the data, and then what we can do is we can say if decrypted starts with if it starts with file, this means binary, this B. If it starts with file, which we quoted the header here, we started it with a file purposely. Oops. If it starts with a file, that means we are receiving a file, right? So we can break this into three components. File size equals decrypt.decode dot split by the separator. This is where the separator comes in handy, because we separated three different things: file, file name, file size, by the separator. So when we make this code, file name and the file size will be updated accordingly. That's why we need this separator. We needed to separate the file name and the file size somehow, and we use a specific separator for that. And the file size also needs to be an integer, because if I'm remembering correctly, it used to be double, I think. And now we need to call the receive file function. Now for the receive file function, we are gonna send the connection file name and the file size. So yeah, this should work. This is basically will work for receiving the file. If we are not receiving the file, then we are basically printing something, so we can put an else there. Take this, oops, and then say, for example, print decrypt decode. Like, we are just printing the message, because if it's not a file, then it is a message. So this should now work. I think we did everything correctly. So let's test it out. But it is showing an error. Where is the error? Here, it shows an error of why. Oh, we don't use, yeah, okay. We use color. Okay, so this should work now. Let's test it out. Python program to the Py. We are gonna start as a server. Python program one to Py. Client. Hi. Let's send hi. It sends hi. Can you see this text? Yeah, text sending is still working, as we can see. Now let's try the file. Let's create a new file. Okay, so I created my s.txt in my JavaScript tutorial folder. Um, so yeah, and now we are gonna copy the path of it. Copy as path, right? I don't think there is another other option. Yeah, we copy it as path. Now, we say slash file. Then we paste the copy, the path. Sorry, and make sure to remove those quotation marks. Send tutorial.txt.txt. Why do we have two txt's here? Yeah, makes sense because this is a text file, so I'm gonna remove the one of the txt's here. Yeah. Now this should send a file. This should create a file in our Python um in our Python folder that we are currently in. We are sending it. For some reason it didn't work. Why it didn't work? Let's see. So I opened two different codes. This one is the working one. This one is where I normally code my code. And this one is the code that we wrote now. And when I try to compare both of them, they must look like the same to me. And there were a couple errors that I made in my code that I coded in this video. I used decode in here, which should always be encode. I made a typo in somewhere. I wrote decrypto. It should always be decrypt. And the header is the same. This part is the same. Obviously, we send the header first, then we send it by chunks. So send file is the same. And the idea that we had was true too. And receive file is the same too. We say receive equals to 0 and write binary. Yeah, it looks same to me. We decrypt it, we write it. Oops. And then start server, start client are both same. For the receive messages, I think this might be the error. We get the fernet.decrypt data, um, fernet.decrypt data, and then uh, if decrypt data starts with file, if decrypt data starts with file, yeah, um, we split it by the separator. We split it by the separator. I mean, it looks the same, and some reason it doesn't work in one and works in the other one. What about the send messages? It should be the same. If message starts with file, oh, one thing that I also realized is I wrote this one in my code, so there should be always a space here, since this is how we enter our files. If it starts with file path equals to message that's split. By the way, I also didn't put space in here, but we need the space because we split it by the space, right? The way we type is like this, slash file and the file names with a space in between them. Um, yep. We send the file. I mean, it is the same, and some reason it works in one and doesn't work in the other. Whatever. I'll upload the code to GitHub as I said, and the idea was true too. Yeah. So that's all for this video. Have a great day.